Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Get Back Guys podcast. I'm Kyle in the hosting chair. We're losing one of our guys. Alex isn't here this time around. He'll be back for the next one, though. But his brother, Nick, did show up, though. Nick, how are you?
I'm doing good, and I think Alex got a little nervous about he wanted Hurts to do bad against the Saints so he could talk about how it's not Wentz's fault, but Hurts played pretty decent. And so he skipped down the episode because he doesn't know how to process it.
I mean, you see how bad that team has been playing, and all of a sudden they're just playing pretty darn good against a Saints team that's, all things considered, a playoff contender. It would rattle a guy. It would rattle.
It's true. I mean, the Saints won 9 in a row, and the Eagles took them out.
Yeah, that was kind of nuts, though. I wasn't expecting to have Hurts put on a show like that. This is going to be the Eagles talk, by the way, since Alex isn't here.
We got to make up for it. Yeah.
But no, good on them. Good on them.
Yeah, good for the Packers and really all the NFC having the Saints lose, keeping that one seed still open for four teams.
No kidding. Well, before we dive into more NFL stuff, we're going to talk about the NBA. But also real quick, thank you guys for checking out this episode. And we are not only available on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, but also on many other podcast platforms. Just look up Get Back Guys Podcast. And, you should be able to find us. Thanks for, tuning in. And Nick, how about we get started? What's there to talk about for NBA, man?
Well, breaking news today, Giannis he signed with the Supermax with the Bucks. So all of the rumors, all of Alex's pleas to get Giannis to Miami are gone. Or at least they're going to have to wait 5 years because Giannis has signed big deal. And it really changes the lance. I mean, every team now has to reevaluate because, teams like Miami, Dallas, teams that feel like they're close but maybe a piece away from getting that championship, were setting themselves up to potentially have max space for Giannis, but Giannis resigns, so now they have to reevaluate. And that next piece on the board is James Harden. So obviously he can't go to the Bucks. I don't think he'll go to the Bucks. They can't afford him, and they gave up so many picks to get Drew Holiday that I don't think they would be able to make a trade work for James Harden. But now the Heat, I think, become a real player in that because James Harden is going to be better than any free agent available unless Kawhi Leonard opts out in the next free agency pool. So I think any team that was thinking about Giannis really needs to think about what could we give up to go get James Harden. And I think the Heat are at the top of that list.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, good for Giannis. Like, that's just going to be great for him. And he's just, obviously one of the best players. Like, for me and how much little basketball I watch, like, if he's on the screen, I stop what I'm doing and I tune right onto it because he's just, that much fun to watch. So run me through this. Like, how big of a deal this was going to be a big deal if Giannis was going to be a free agent, but how much did the rest of the NBA teams really think that they were going to be able to actually land this guy in, say, free agency? Like, did people think that was going to be very likely, or was this deal not a surprise?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I think a lot of people figured Giannis would end up signing, but there was if he didn't, he really could have gone anywhere. If he had decided to not stay in Milwaukee, there is a lot of places that could use one piece to the puzzle for Giannis. And I know in the back of every team's mind, all other teams besides the Bucks are thinking, what would we do? Is there any way we could somehow get him here, even though for, probably 90% of those teams, it's unrealistic, but everyone has to consider it because he's that good. And we probably haven't seen his best basketball. He's only 26 years old. So he's still a few years away from hitting his prime, which is unreal for the fact that he's won back-to-back MVPs. But I also think this is a really good move for just the NBA. Because there is this feeling, that whenever someone, it's like all these small markets draft, hoping to get someone like Giannis, and then or hoping to get someone like LeBron or Anthony Davis or Kevin Durant. And we've seen so many of those guys leave where it's like, we're going to get them and we're going to, the franchise going to be lifted up for 5 or 6 years. And then they're going to leave in free agency and go to a big market. And so
Yeah.
Giannis staying, last year, Damian Lillard, not nearly as good of a player, but still a star in the league. He stayed in Portland. So I think it's good for the NBA that small markets are, retaining their star players, a couple of big ones recently. And Steph Curry also has stayed in Golden State. And so I think it's good for the NBA. It's good for my Spurs right here. Let's go. Flashing them on the screen. Wearing my DeMar jersey, but yeah, I think it's a good move for the NBA. But yeah, I don't know how realistic it was that Giannis was ever going to leave, but I'm certain that a team like Dallas and Miami specifically, those two come to mind off the top of my head, definitely thought that if he did hit free agency, that they would have a really good chance to get him. With the culture there in Miami, I think Giannis would have worked perfectly, and with Luka Doncic, him and Giannis would have been arguably the best duo in the league outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis. But it's good for the NBA. I think in the last few weeks, maybe a few people thought it might not happen because of the Bogdanovich trade, sign trade getting messed up. But I think, once they traded for Drew Holiday and they gave up so much for him, that it seemed like the writing was on the wall and that Giannis was going to stay, and that kind of anything outside of that was just wishful thinking for other franchises getting that type of a player.
Well, speaking of the wishful thinking franchises, before Giannis was going to be signing this deal, Harden, or there was rumors at least going around that Harden was preferring like the Sixers and the Heat and the Bucks, to be traded to one of those three teams. Obviously, now the Bucks isn't going to be one of those teams. So maybe it'll be the Heat now that the Heat see that they can't get Giannis, at least in the next season. So do you think Sixers and the Heat are going to be those two teams that are going to be the top players for Harden, or do you see it being maybe like the Mavs, as you were saying, for like Giannis?
Yeah, I don't know if the Mavs will have the type of trade ability to get a player like Harden, and I don't know how good of a fit he would be with Luka versus with like Joel Embiid or with Jimmy Butler for the 76ers and for Miami.
Yeah.
But so I don't know if the Mavs would trade Harden. Also, they're in the same division, so the Mavs, Spurs, Pelicans, they might be a little bit tougher to get a trade done. Obviously, I fantasized about us trading for Harden too.
Yeah.
I think if Harden were to get dealt before the season starts, I think Miami would be that destination where if Miami really wants to get Harden and they're willing to trade Tyler Hero and they're willing to trade Nunn, and I don't think they would probably give up Bam, but they're willing to give up a couple of picks. And that's good enough for the Rockets. And the Rockets say we need to get rid of Harden. He really wants out of here, and we think we have a decent team with John Wall and just a couple of young players will keep us, around the playoffs. It would happen before the season because now he have confirmation that Giannis is not coming here. But if the season starts or we get a week into the season and James Harden is still in the Rockets, then my guess is that the 76ers really come into play, where if we get to the trade deadline and they are not playing that well under Doc Rivers, Daryl Morey will pull a trigger on a trade, I think, and get Ben Simmons out of there. I know they don't want to trade him yet, but it seems like that might end up happening if they end up being the 6th seed in the East all of a sudden. And there is a couple of wild card teams like the Celtics. If they start really slow, they have the firepower to do it, right? Like there's only a handful of teams that can probably give up enough in not only picks, but in young talent to get a player like James Harden. So that's a team that comes to mind. Obviously, you can't throw out Brooklyn quite yet. And that's a team that if they really struggle halfway through the season, maybe they would be willing to really shake things up. So I think the only team that if Harden were to get dealt in the next 2 weeks here, it would be to Miami probably, unless a West team that hasn't kind of been on the radar shows up out of nowhere. But I think more likely it's around the trade deadline, and whatever team is struggling might go make a move for James Harden.
Okay. Okay, I see what you mean there. So let's pivot from all the Giannis and James Harden talk and talk about Paul George, who just a couple of days ago signed his max with the Clippers as well.
Yeah.
So first off, do you think that's a good move by the Clippers? And do you think that will convince Kawhi to, not stay or to stay with the Clippers instead of maybe seeing what else he can look for this next offseason?
Yeah, I don't know if this move will have any bearing on what Kawhi decides to do. I think it's all results oriented. If they win the finals, he's probably going to stay. But if they get bounced in the second round again, then I think it's a legitimate possibility that he leaves. Although he is from LA, and that is Kawhi's home city, and so
Yeah.
I I don't really see him leaving, but he's done some wild things that no one saw the last couple of years. He's left a team after winning the finals, right? He pushed his way out of San Antonio. It's hard to know him because of
He's
how little
crafty,
he
man.
speaks. Yeah, and there's rumors of him just wanting to do whatever he wants, and so we don't really hear it from him. So I don't really know what he'll do.
Hmm.
But if they do, get bounced in the second round of the playoffs again, it's definitely going to be a consideration, I think, for him to leave. I think this deal, it's funny how much money Paul George is making. That's the kind of thing that happens with maxes, where Paul George, if he plays like he did last postseason, this coming year he'll be getting wildly overpaid. But I think it makes a lot of sense because they gave up so much to get him that they got to double down, because if they can't risk losing him and Kawhi next year. So even if Kawhi walks, they've still got a piece where they can hopefully, Paul George, as hard of a time as so many people will give him, he could still play really good basketball at times.
Yeah.
Hasn't been in the biggest moments, but they can't risk losing nothing. So I think the deal makes sense for them overall.
Do you think if Paul George didn't sign his supermax, do you think that would have gone to Kawhi, or do you think Kawhi it wasn't going to do it no matter what and is going to wait this thing out?
I think he's gonna wait it out at least this year,
Yeah.
and I think it's all dependent on how they do. Because if they do really well, I could see him just staying for another year and then reevaluating then, or if they do really bad, he might just leave. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the Lakers getting as loaded as they are, it's just so hard. It must be just so hard to decide, like, what would you want to do when you're on the Clippers, or at least from the player's perspective, especially with Kawhi. Like, okay,
Mhm.
could Paul and I still try and draw other guys in so that way we can be as loaded as them, or is this just going to be a place where I can't, compete with those guys, so I need to go to a different market and make my own again?
Yeah, this season's going to be really interesting to see what happens with, uh, if Kawhi, if they end up collapsing in the playoffs again, or not even collapsing, but just not making it that far, even if they make it to the Western Conference Finals, but get, a gentleman's sweep by the Lakers, losing 5 games. I don't know what free agents are really going to be looking to go play there, because Kawhi's leadership has been questioned so much after this year, and the fact that his 2 championships have come around already built teams, with a really strong core that had played together for years without him. The
Hmm.
Spurs, obviously, that same core played for so long before he was even drafted, and then he came up and played really well in that system and grew into a great player. And then he went to a team that had made it to a Western Conference Finals without him, and had won 60 games not that, the year before he got there. So that will be really interesting if it doesn't seem like the chemistry gets better with the Clippers. I think a lot of other players are going to say, why would we want to go play for Kawhi with Kawhi when we could go play with, Luka Doncic, even if if we're taking the Lakers out of it, players like that. And
Yeah.
the Clippers could be in a pretty tough spot because the Lakers are dominant right now. And so say they take a step back and, a handful of years, if LeBron starts to go back down, you have the Dallas Mavericks with Luka coming up, and you also have the Nuggets, who already beat them, seemingly to continue to get better. So the Clippers might be in a weird spot that the Rockets were in just a couple of years ago, where, you know in any other year, almost the Rockets in 2018, in any other year, that team easily wins a championship. But they ran into the Golden State Warriors with 5 Hall of Famers. And
Yeah.
so the Clippers might end up being in a situation like that. It won't hurt Kawhi's legacy as much as it will hurt Paul George's, because Kawhi does have 2 championships and Paul George has none. But it really might hurt Kawhi's ability to get a championship outside of, that the already constructed nucleus.
Yeah.
So I think the Clippers are really interesting, but I think it makes sense to lock up Paul George.
Yeah, it makes sense. Although at the same time, like the more that I'm listening to you talk about that Clippers situation, it almost feels like without meaning to, they backed themselves into a corner, and it kind of does feel like almost a Rockets situation where it's like, well, either we're going to go the distance and be a great team, or it's all not going to work and we might regret this in 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
makes me worried after listening to you. Obviously the season hasn't even begun yet, but
But
it
it's
feels like that
true.
right now.
And the Rockets didn't even give up as much to create their team as the Clippers did. I mean,
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard really backed them into a corner. Obviously, it's good for, I think overall it's good for them just because they got a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's big for so many reasons. But he said, "I'm only coming here if you get Paul George," and they gave up so many picks to get Paul George that they're not going to be able to trade for anybody else. And with Kawhi's leadership style, is anyone really going to want to sign there outside of the only person they got this year was someone who had already played with him in Serge Ibaka? And I think that's a pretty good pickup. But if they're not able to get over the hump, we might look back on this and say, man, they gave up so much for Paul George up front, taking his contract out of it. They gave up so many picks for him that it really handicapped them to make their team better. And Kawhi isn't enough of an attraction to get big free agents. That could be an outcome. And they're not going to have the excuse that the Rockets had, where the Rockets are probably, James Harden probably has a championship if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt in Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals a handful of years ago. The Clippers have no excuse like that. They just got flat out beat in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
So this season is really big for the Clippers franchise if they'll ever be able to overcome, never making it to a Western Conference Final.
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll then switch over from NBA talks. That's all that we have so far with that, and
Yeah.
we'll see preseason start for NBA, right? Like that. That's we're in the mix of that right now. So there's not really too much to discuss unless if there's like a team that's really like emerging, but even still, that's really early.
Yeah, it was nice to see Kevin Durant back playing. And I think the Nets are going to be really good, and they might be better quicker than people might have thought, because Kevin Durant is just such a talent. But other than that, just rookies don't have a summer league, so now they're really
thrown to the fire.
Their first, but basketball starting it'll be a week or a little bit less than a week from when this episode releases.
All right,
the regular season will be up.
All right, so then let's switch over to the NFL instead. I guess last week there was one piece of news that we weren't able to talk about. Greg Williams of the Jets did get fired after, having their defense blitz the Raiders, and they had launched that great touchdown to Henry Ruggs. So Greg Williams is out of there. But speaking of the Raiders, just a few days ago, they also fired their defensive coordinator. I believe his name was Rob Marinelli. I thought like the Raiders defense was actually pretty good at the start of the season, but it looks like they really have fallen off a cliff in the second half. So Nick, do you have any thoughts about those two? Probably not so much with the Jets because they're just bad.
Yeah. The Greg Williams is interesting because that's very much in his nature to blitz that call, but obviously did not work out there. And that whole staff needs to be fired. But we've been singing that since week 1. Especially
fire Adam Gase still.
Yeah. But the Raiders are, I think when they beat the Chiefs, we might have overestimated how good they were going to be because their defense was playing pretty good, but they are still in need of a pass rush. Corey Littleton who we all thought I for sure thought it was a great pickup.
Yeah,
I know he's actually had a really bad year. And so I don't know if that's scheme or it's just regression and a guy who played really great in a contract year, because that happens.
Yeah.
Because he was awesome with the Rams just a year ago. So I think overall, hopefully that, kind of gets them playing a little bit better, and kind of fires them back up. But the Raiders are a decent team. They still have a decent chance to make the playoffs. They're going to be in a battle there, but they are probably not as good as I thought. A decent team, but yeah, hopefully this can make their defense play a little bit better down the stretch.
Yeah, at least it'll give the Raiders staff reason to look into their scheme and maybe what they should change and find a guy to match with it in the offseason. But yeah, I was kind of in the same boat with you. I mean, the Raiders were able to beat the Chiefs because of their defense. I mean, they were able to get close. I believe they beat the Saints in like week 2, right? Remember when that happened all those weeks ago? Like, it was an impressive win too. So here I was assuming that the Raiders defense was good, but I guess even John Gruden saw that, it just wasn't going to work. And they've seen over the past few weeks that it was just decline in play. And, I give props to John Gruden. Like, you try something out with a staff member, but clearly if you know that you have the right talent, but you don't have the right guy, to call the plays and get the schemes up correctly, then, you're going to have to find someone else.
Yeah, so this is a move. Yeah, this is a move that could end up looking really good. If their defense does start playing better and they sneak into the playoffs, I think it'll show to a lot of coaches where if you have a personnel group that you think's underperforming, and even though you're a decent team, they're above 500. Obviously, they're not at the top of the conference, but they're still they have a good record. Maybe it's a coordinator, and even though we're having some success, we can do this mid-season and it can benefit us. And I think there's a lot of teams, the Packers are one that comes to mind, where their defense seems to be underperforming often to the personnel that they're putting out there. And so you think about maybe we need a change up. And so this could be an interesting if it does end up working out for them.
Yeah, I mean, that Raiders team, really, I still don't think they're far off from being a playoff contender even. I mean, we've seen their offense being able to do a pretty good job. I've liked what I've seen out of Josh Jacobs. I've liked how Derek Carr has almost reinvigorated himself. He looks a lot better than he has, the past 2 or 3 years after he almost was in like MVP conversation back in, probably even 2015. So it might have been even 5 years ago. So it seems like they're on the right track when it comes to the offense, but defense, I guess they are starting to make the right move, or at least I hope it's the right move. We'll see how that plays out.
How it works. Yeah.
Yeah. And then right after that, for the NFL news, we found out that the Texans are looking into 2 possible head coaches for their future. It looks like one of them is going to be Eric Bieniemy, who is the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. That's not too surprising. I figured that he's going to be on the top of every, team's list that does need a head coach. But the other one was offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks, Brian Schottenheimer, and that one made me chuckle. But Nick, do you have any thoughts before I give my thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I'm more curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, I think we've all been singing to get Eric Bieniemy in there. We want a really awesome offensive head coach to really take Deshaun Watson, who's playing incredible football, even though they had not a great game against the Bears.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's so good. And just I think that's who should be the head coach, so not surprising there. But I'm curious to see what you think about your boy, the offense coordinator, in there as well.
It made me giggle, honestly. And I mean, I'm fine with Brian Schottenheimer as our coordinator. I know that I've, complained quite a bit about, sometimes our coordinators and our head coach aren't able to make game plan decisions or be able to change things up middle of the games, especially if we're losing really bad. But I still think that he's done a really good job as a coordinator over the past 3 years, but not because of him being a schematic offensive guru mastermind. I think he's just good at building up the playbook and letting Russ do things. You know what I mean? He knows what this is the best quarterback he's probably ever, coached, probably next to Drew Brees, who he's worked with many years ago. But he just knows okay, Russ is just that good. I'll call the plays, but it's Russ. Russ can do what Russ wants to do. So it sounds like he's a really well-liked guy when it comes to being, a coach, and it looks like he knows what he has in his talent, but I never get the impression that he's head coach material. I never get the impression that I never get the impression that, he's the type of guy to lead a full locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these teams are looking for the next guru, the next, top guy to be the head coach who can give them the flashy offense. I don't believe in that mantra necessarily, although I do like Eric Bieniemy a lot. I just don't see Schottenheimer as being that at all.
Yeah.
So it made me chuckle. I mean, if he does get the job, good for him. I don't think that's the right choice for the Texans, though. Deshaun Watson's still going to be amazing no matter what, but I would say that you should probably not get Brian Schottenheimer to be the guy. I would much rather it be Eric Bieniemy, but also I just would like Eric Bieniemy to be any one of these teams' head coaches, the Falcons or even the Jets or, maybe even the Jaguars. I don't know about that quite yet. It sounds like they might still want Doug Marrone, which doesn't make sense to me, but, we'll see how that still plays out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you there.
But then there's one final thing. I forgot to mention this to Nick before we even started this show, but I do have one more piece of NFL news. Nickelodeon is going to be filming one of the AFC wildcard games, and it just sounds and looks as ridiculous as it sounds like. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I don't really know what to expect. I just kind of glanced at like the little trailer, so I'm not sure exactly what they're going to be doing, but hopefully it's cool. Like, I have no idea.
It didn't look good to me. It looked very cheesy, but it looked very on brand Nickelodeon. But I don't know. I haven't watched Nickelodeon in years. Like, I'm sure maybe kids will like it, but I feel like for me, I wouldn't really want to. Like, football is always separate to me from SpongeBob. I don't know. It just
fair enough. Yeah, it's kind of an odd partnership. I mean, I can understand wanting to get more younger fans into the game if they think they're like losing fans to other sports. But I don't know. I have no idea what to expect, honestly. I don't know if it's going to be like that's kind of a funny thing on the side or just annoying. And it's like, I just want to get back to the game. So
from the little that I saw, it's just like, if a player's celebrating, like the big guys like pop up SpongeBob's or something. Like they even showed like the netting for, when kickers are kicking of like a giant face of SpongeBob. And it's like, I don't want to be the kicker in that situation. Looking up and seeing SpongeBob's face. So
Justin Tucker just nailing it through.
He still would do it, obviously.
It's true.
Like, I feel like any other kicker will look up and be like, that's just disturbing.
Yeah, Cody Parkey wouldn't even get a chance to doink.
Oh, geez. He would just whiff it completely. He would just be so scared. But you can't blame him.
It's true.
Well, anyway, we'll move off of all that news stuff for now. We didn't even sing Kyle with the news, but that's fine. When Alex gets back,
my bad.
Back to normal. No, it's okay. Alex is the one that remembers. It's always a train.
He's the vocal leader. We know it is.
But anyway, we'll get into our segment of what do we call this? Over and unders and surprise-a-roos. I don't know what we call this.
Over-under's good, I think.
All right, so Nick, do you have an overreaction or an underreaction that we need to talk about?
I don't necessarily have an overreaction or underreaction. It's kind of this point in the season where I think people are really starting to get dialed with their takes and everything. But I do just want to talk about the game last night and how amazing it was. That's the Ravens-Browns game. And that was one of the most wild conclusions. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. I watched
the end of it.
Yeah, I watched the last quarter and a half, and I was watching it for fantasy reasons, and everything worked out well. So that's
awesome
good
job.
For me.
Took down one of the Kings, right?
Yep, I did. Yeah, one in both of my leagues there, so got
Very
a chance
nice.
to win some big bucks here. But
I suck.
Yeah, you got a tough loss there.
Nah, that's fine. Anyway, you keep going.
Yeah, but Lamar Jackson kind of reminded me why I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And even though he's had a little bit of a down year, and the Ravens have had kind of an odd year where they were dominant to start the year outside of one game against Kansas City, then rattled off 3 losses, and it was kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And I think it was just kind of a mix of the teams kind of having, a lot of injuries here and there. They obviously got nailed by COVID, and Lamar actually was like, he didn't just have it and he was fine. He was like in bed for 10 straight days. And so to see him have a game like this where, he didn't throw the ball that much at the beginning, but obviously he still ran the ball incredibly well, super efficient, and then having that touchdown pass to Hollywood Brown and then following that next drive up with one to win it was incredible. Just reminding me how good he can be. Obviously, this defense is really banged up, and they need to get healthy if they are gonna really compete. Because I think if they do get healthy, they can beat anyone probably outside of the Chiefs in the AFC. But also the Browns are for real too, and these are two really good teams, and they might end up being. With the Steelers stumbling a little bit, they might end up, if the Ravens are able to get healthy, the two better teams in that division, even though they won't probably have it record-wise. But Baker played awesome outside of that one costly interception that did hurt them, obviously, in the game. And they probably win that game if he doesn't throw that and they are able to score on that drive. But he played overall really well, and that team is really good. And that's another team that I don't think anyone wants to see either the Ravens or the Browns in the postseason because they have they have a younger quarterback who's really exciting and playing pretty well, and they've got playmakers and they've got good defensive players. Myles Garrett is obviously a monster. So just yeah, so just a lot of that was a great game, and those two quarterbacks I hope are really good in this league for a long time, and so I just had a lot of fun watching it. So that's what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off of you, kind of jump over my over underrated reaction, talk about my surprise, which is the Browns. Because it felt like for a couple of weeks, even after Odell's injury, they just and Nick Chubb's as well. Nick Chubb also got injured around the same
Yeah.
times. They just weren't really able to move that well as an offense, and there was like some really low scoring games. But if you look at it, like they just got really bad luck when it came to weather, and they just weren't really able to do much damage. But now that we're seeing, under some somewhat better conditions, and they're able to get some stuff in order, be able to get Nick Chubb back. Like this team is a Browns team that I've never seen before in my lifetime.
Oh,
like
it's true.
I mean, the Ravens defense, they're good on paper. They're really good on paper, but they haven't been, as dominant as we thought that they would be. But still, the fact that Baker Mayfield, without Odell, and just is able to do as well of a job as he did throughout that game under the lights, like that's
Incredible.
That's a statement game. I'm not necessarily saying that Baker should now be, considered a top 10 quarterback or that this team's going to the Super Bowl. But I am saying like this team is going to be legit, and they have a foundation that is working. They have a head coach that knows the talent that he has and is able to build a locker room culture and is able to utilize his players to exactly what they need to do. I believe they also didn't even have Austin Hooper. I might be incorrect about that, but
I don't know. He was out.
He was out? Okay, but
I think
even still though, I believe David Njoku was able to be in that game. I know Harrison Bryant was able to be in that game. Obviously, they have Jarvis and Kareem and Nick Chubb, but I'm seeing Baker throw to a rookie like Donovan Peoples-Jones, and no one's, I don't think, ever heard of this guy until now, and he looked pretty good. Rashard Higgins is also another guy that Baker is just utilized, and the coach as well is just utilizing so well. And I don't know, it was surprising to me because I thought that, I guess the surprise is that this Browns team has looked as good as they have. We figured like they should be good, but what is their record now? 9-3, 9-4. That is very impressive. And the fact that they were as close with the Ravens as they were in this game under the lights, you just have to give it up to that entire team. Like the Browns fans, I'm sure, are really sad that they didn't win, but this is still a win for the Browns fans. And so it's just surprising just how much of a leap that this team is making. And it just makes me really excited to, now be excited for Baker Mayfield, because that dropped off really quick last year.
Yeah. It's weird to, like, this team on paper, they should be this good, but it it's weird to see the Browns actually doing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited for them. And Baker he's playing back to kind of where he was his rookie year, where he's not the greatest quarterback in the world. He has a chance to have a couple of really good seasons, I think, as time moves on. But he's playing pretty good football right now, and they've got good weapons. Kevin Stefanski's an awesome coach. They definitely could have won that game without the magic of another really good quarterback, and seeing Lamar throw the ball was really cool and good for his progression to win that game. And really the AFC is really interesting to me, because if the Chiefs are obviously, I think, a lot better than most of the teams because they're just so good. And even when they play bad, they still end up winning easily.
I'll talk about that later. Yeah.
But it seems like any team, if the Chiefs have a game where they just don't play as well and it lasts for more than a quarter, feels like almost any team in the AFC could have a chance at making it. Like, it feels like the Ravens and the Browns and the Steelers and the Titans and the Bills, they could all realistically make it pretty far in the playoffs, which is really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've slowly seen over the years that the AFC is becoming one where it's, the Patriots, and then maybe another team could be, it's like the team of the year type thing to see who could be able to possibly take down the Patriots.
Yeah.
But I think over the last 2 years,
see that?
You go.
Yeah, no, you finish.
Okay, I was just saying that I think over these past few years, we've seen the AFC going away from that, and they are becoming smarter teams, and they're now shifting so much to where they are all now, knowing how to become a contender, while, the old ways of, whatever 20 plus years that it has been, it's like, it's no longer Patriots and or whatever other guy there could be.
Yeah, I mean, before Patty went to the Super Bowl last year, there was like a 15 or 20 year period where only a handful of quarterbacks represented the AFC in the Super Bowl, and that was Peyton Manning with the Colts and Broncos, Tom Brady with the Patriots. Then you have Ben Roethlisberger with the Steelers, who hasn't been there in almost 10 years or 10 years this year.
Yeah.
And then 1 year of Joe Flacco.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was the last one. That's right. Jeez.
So those are the only quarterbacks that had represented the AFC in a super long time until now, Patty Mahomes. And it's going to be to see who can overthrow him now, because last year, obviously, they won a Super Bowl. The year before that, they were in the conference championship game. So it seems like Patty's going to dominate until someone takes it away from him. And when that happens, I think the AFC could really kind of show like the NFC has for the last, 20 years, where we've seen a lot of different quarterbacks represent them. And it's kind of whoever makes it the furthest, whoever gets the hottest versus whoever's, has Tom Brady or Peyton Manning.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Chiefs playing poorly, that was going to be my underrated reaction. And it's not because of the Chiefs. Like, the Chiefs are still good. Who cares if Patty threw 3 picks? Who cares if they fumbled twice or whatever it was? I want to talk about the Dolphins, though. Like, no matter what was being handed to them by the Chiefs, whether they were able to finally get a pick, but then, Patty still throws a deep ball in the next possession and keeps scoring points, or Mecole Hardman, still darts for a punt return after the Dolphins tried to hold them on a previous offensive play or whatever, offensive series. I mean, the Dolphins still work hard, and they were, getting banged up against that Chiefs team during that whole game. I was watching them because I have Mike Gesicki on my fantasy team, and, he was finally balling out until he got injured. And then I was seeing, other players get injured on top of that. So Tua's almost playing with like the third or fourth backup guys against this Chiefs defense, which is pretty good. So I'm like, oh man, this is still not going to be good. But, somehow the Dolphins were able to fight back on offense and at least get close. That Dolphins defense, I didn't have Kyle Van Noy or some of their other players, but they still did a great job. Did you see Xavier Howard's one-handed pick?
It was incredible.
That was so cool. Like, the Dolphins,
he's balling.
He's balling, man. This whole team's balling. Like, Brian Flores, like, we keep saying week in and week out, like, this Dolphins team is fun to watch because they got the right coach to build just something really special at that team. And no matter who they're facing, and no matter what guys they're having to use, they just keep going at it and keep making things difficult. That's fun. That's awesome to see.
Yeah, Brian Flores, I think if they get to double-digit wins, could have a chance to win Coach of the Year, depending on how because now Mike Tomlin's, because they've lost 2 in a row, they might not be the 1 seed, so they might not get it. I think Matt LaFleur has a chance to. But yeah, the Dolphins are so much fun to watch, and that was an interesting game because the outcome was predictable. The Chiefs won. The Dolphins lost, but everything about the game was just not what I expected. Patty Mahomes had his worst quarter ever. He had some of the worst plays he's made where he had, the 2 picks. Obviously they were tipped, but neither of them were great throws either. And then he took the horrendous sack, which you don't see, but often
like 30-yard sack or something.
The longest weird. In NFL. Weird weekend. We had the longest sack in NFL history with that sack of Patty Mahomes, and also Baker Mayfield threw, I think, the longest throw yardage wise ever with that Hail Mary attempt. I think at the end of the half that ended up going out of the back of the end zone, but I think they counted how long it went, and it was the PFF said it was the longest one they've ever charted, which is wild to me. But
interesting.
Yeah. And but yeah, the Dolphins are awesome. Tua, they were missing, the Dolphins were missing their top 3 running backs and top 2 wide receivers by the end of that game when Devontae Parker went out, and Gesicki by the end. So Tua still has some development to go to get that deep ball. He obviously has first pick, but I think once the pieces get around him and he gets more confidence, especially if they make it to the playoffs, this team's going to be scary for years to come, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, man. I mean, we keep, I'm sure listeners, whoever they are, if there are even any, like if they must get so tired of us talking about the Dolphins, but if you just pay attention, like the Dolphins are cool.
It's
They're
true.
a good team.
All right. I love it.
All right, so I think we're going to wrap this episode up soon, but we need to talk about us, of course, because that's what this podcast is all about. So we already talked about Alex's Eagles. Who knows what his thoughts are? We'll figure that out next week.
Yeah.
But Nick, walk me through the Packers. They're looking really good, and I'm scared.
Yeah, so I think it's big time. Obviously, good win. The defense needs to play a little bit better in spots. Special teams needs to play a little bit better. I think Tavon Austin could end up having a bigger impact than I thought at first, just because if he's able to do punt and kick returns decently, it's going to give us a big boost, because with Tyler Irving being hurt most of the year, we haven't had no return game. So that could be good for us, and will be important in the playoffs if he is able to kind of get back to where he was a few years ago. Really, the biggest thing for us is that the Saints lost, and that we have a really good chance to win our next 3 games against the Panthers, Titans, both of those at home, and then against the Bears to end the season. If we can win out, we get the 1 seed. And why that's big is obviously we are the only team that gets a bye, but when you think about the contenders that will be coming to Lambeau, Drew Brees and Jared Goff, they play in warm weather, and Drew Brees with his arm, how good is he going to be? And if it's a super cold game in Lambeau versus Aaron Rodgers still being able to sling it, Jared Goff, as good as that running game has been the last couple of weeks, when you're going up against Aaron Rodgers, you're going to have to sling it, and I don't know how good he'll play in the weather. And then Russell Wilson has never won in Lambeau. In our 8 games playing, you've won all 4 at home, and although one of them probably should be a win for the Packers, called the Fail Mary, but all 4, all 4 for at Lambeau, we have won. So that would be big for Aaron, and seeing Tom Brady have to go. I mean, he's obviously played in a lot of cold weather games, but I think home field advantage would be really big for us. But other than that, it's just about staying healthy and keeping it up. What about your Hawks and your huge win against the Jets?
Gotta be honest, I was scared. That we'd actually lose. Losing to the Giants really put things into perspective for me, and I was like, I mean, if we did lose to the Jets too, that might need to be a wake-up call or something. That would just be terrible. But we were, I think we showed how bad the Jets are. The Jets are just a terrible team. I feel really bad for Sam Darnold, but that's just how it is. I would have loved to see Adam Gase get fired, but I guess they still want to hang on to him because they think that they could win without him, I guess. Trust me, you're not going to. That team's just bad. but I didn't really see anything from our or our game time decision making of our schemes of any sort. Like it didn't look like anything changed. I was hoping for there to be kind of a come to Jesus moment and for things to kind of be changed and rearranged, like some of it on offense, especially, but it looked like we still stayed the course and, we just blew out the team. So
yeah,
at least we got a good win and we were saying to ourselves, hey, like it's fun to blow out teams. Maybe we could do that against better teams. I would hope that would be kind of fun because I haven't seen us blow out a team in almost 3 years now.
Yeah.
It's usually one score possession games, but yeah, I felt like this wasn't really anything to learn about. I felt like they were still staying the course, win or lose, we're staying the course, which makes me nervous. But I don't know. It was at least fun to watch the team get blown out, so at least that was something. We are starting. Oh, you go.
Oh, it just seemed like a nice return to form against a bad team and putting you guys hopefully in a good spot for your biggest game of the year. That's going to be against the Rams in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's really going to be the final decision for how things are going to go. So between the Rams and the Seahawks when it comes to the playoffs, I'm pretty nervous about that, but we'll just have to get there when we get there. I hope like it is just a way to recharge our systems and be like, okay, if we can do this, we can do this with the Washington TBDs, and we can do this with the Rams especially, and we'll see how it is with the with the Niners. Excuse me, they're competitive, but I don't know. I still don't know if they're going to be in the playoffs at all.
Yeah, you play Washington this week.
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, that's a weirdly tough game. Actually, that's you got the NFC East when two of the teams are kind of playing okay. That's a bummer versus the beginning of the year when they were all horrific.
Yeah, so, no kidding.
But still should win that game.
Yeah. I feel like we can. It's mostly the defensive line that I'm worried about. I mean, it's just they got a lot of studs on that team. Other than that, though, I think we could be pretty good otherwise.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I guess that wraps up this episode, huh?
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that's it. We nailed it without that Alex guy.
Who needs him?
Not us.
Yeah. Oh no. We could use him though. We'd love for him to come back.
It's true. We want to hear him rant about Jalen and Carson.
Okay. Well, everyone, thanks for enduring us. We'll get Alex back next week. But thank you for listening or watching this episode of the Get Back Guys podcast. Again, check us out on YouTube. Check us out on all podcast platforms. Like, subscribe, share, talk about us if you want to. We'd appreciate all the buzz. And we'll catch you guys next time.
See you guys.
Audio Jungle.